So if it's all right, I'm just going to introduce myself and what we're here to talk about today. And then I'm going to introduce the fantastic Lena Samuels, who's joining us for this session. I'll talk us briefly through the agenda, which is pretty basic. And then I'm going to hand over to Lena, and then Ali's going to close for us, just talking a little bit about what's coming next with some of this stuff. So welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Fiona Rodden, and I'm the Head of Talent for the South East. And this is the first of our bite-sized sessions that we're using to really support leaders and talent in the South East over, for most of us, what's been the toughest period of our career, and likely is going to continue to be tough over the next period, shall we say. I don't want to put a number on it. But I think one of the really important things with this session is that during times of significant pressure, there is also an opportunity for huge growth. And that's what this session is really about. It's the first of our sessions to really help us think about these sorts of things in a different way. It's knowing that we're not just trying to get through this next bit, it's going to keep coming. So how do we hold ourselves to account, to pause, to breathe and reflect, and to create some of the space to do our best thinking and our best leadership? I would really love, in setting some of the context for talent and leadership, to be able to give you a really clear picture on what's going to be happening, what's our strategy, and what activity is going to be coming over the next year or so. There is a leadership and talent review going on at the moment. And the upside of the fact that that review is still going on is it gives us the time for others to tell us, what do you want? So whether that is as part of our longer term strategy or whether it's about what you need right now, we really, really want you to tell us. And it may not be in this session, but Francesca's going to post a link to a survey that was sent out just to get some quick tick box thoughts if you haven't given it to us already. But we'd really like to have a conversation with you. And so if you have something in mind around what you need or want, then please get in touch, whether that's by email is easier or by phone or whatever. And Ali will talk at the end of this session around how this fits into our bigger picture for at least the next 6 months or so. And I'm going to introduce Lena now, and I decided I'm not going to talk to you about her job or her role. I think you can Google her various bios across many different organisations that are on the internet. But I'm going to give her a bit of a personal introduction, if that's all right. And she's probably going to go, what? But we asked Lena to do this first session, not because of her job and her authority and in setting some of the work that we're doing, but because she's got a really inspiring vision for leadership and for talent, and has been really involved in what we've been doing over the last kind of years, I would say, and has a really key role in defining what it's going to look like going forward. So listening to her views on the way we're going with this is something that we felt was really important for you all to hear as part of your kind of longer term development. But also because I think Lena is one of the few leaders who I work with in the South East, and there are many, who energizes wherever I see her. And that's not just me, but you see the energy in a room being lifted, and not in a false way that is a smiley face, but in an authentic and present way. It's not about creating the energy and a slight panic in the room to get things done, but she really encourages us to think above and beyond in a way that galvanizes real change with real impact in mind. So I hope that's not too much of a task that I've set you today, Lena, but I know you will rise to it. Thank you so much for joining us. And I'm gonna, I didn't do the agenda, but you can see it. So I will hand over to Lena now. Thank you.
Fiona, thank you so much for such a warm introduction. I really appreciate that. Thank you. And actually, it kind of leads very nicely into the reason why we're here today. It's about that whole reflection, isn't it? You don't often see yourself through the eyes of other people, so that's actually really nice, and it's good to know that whilst one may not purposefully go forward to create a step change in the way you've just described, it's nice to know that somehow it lands in the right direction. So I'm going to start off with my slides, if I may, and I believe Francesca is going to put us in the driving seat. And I thought, you know, it's quite good, isn't it, whilst we take this time out. Many of you are at this point in your career where you're probably thinking about what the next steps are going to be. Fiona has very rightly talked about this being an extraordinary period in time when, yes, it does make us think a lot. Everybody has had a lot of time to think about who they are and what they're doing, and we're going to explore that in a little bit more detail now. And how I've sort of designed this session really is to tee up, if you like, some thinking for you to take away for when you go out into your breakout sessions, to just maybe take away some of the thoughts, not simply that I've had, but actually there's a whole erudite community of academics out there who spend their whole time studying leadership and reflective leadership. So I wanted to sort of deconstruct what exactly does leadership mean. Now, we all do it quite a lot. Many of you are doing some very, very responsible jobs already where you're having to make decisions every day in the moment and at pace. And some of what you'll see now you may recognise. And I would say, looking at our first slide, leadership is very much about achieving goals, isn't it? We work in an NHS where we are very much held our feet to the fire for delivering on outcomes. And we know, because of the industry that we work in, we work with people, and we need to organise our people in such a way that we're going to be able to deliver on some of those outcomes. And quite often, I think what isn't actually talked about is the ethics of being a leader. We probably don't necessarily check in very often, and I'll really welcome other people's views on this, as to whether we come back and talk about what the values base is upon which we decide we want to lead, who gives us that mandate. There's a book that I would commend to you to read, and it's called Psychopathic Cultures, Toxic Empires. It's written by someone who I believe is called Will Black. And the reason I commend it is because quite often there is a blueprint for what a leader looks like, who's someone who's driving ambition, very much about wanting to and needing to, in some regards, to put their ego in the centre of that drive. But actually, have they got the right composition of, I guess, aspirations and attributes that is what is needed for an authentic organisation, for an organisation particularly where we're involved in caring for people. So that's a little bit about what we think leadership might be, and I'm sure there'll be many other things that we could use to add to that list. Let's have a look at the attributes now. So I've used the word emotionally intelligent, and it's a word that is bandied around quite a bit, isn't it? We talk about it being one of the things that we really need to be if we're going to be a good leader. And one of the, I would also challenge ourselves and each other in terms of what we actually mean by that. Sometimes we do think, yes, it's about someone who's got a vision and who is able to take many people with them. That actually, when they're working with their team, they are coaching, they are supportive. Affiliative, yes, somebody who looks to create harmony within their teams, not creating a competitive environment as some people do within their own teams, who gives people democratic stakeholder ownership in terms of where that future direction is going to be. And whilst we talk about emotional intelligence, sometimes people say, well, surely isn't that soft and fluffy? We still need to have pace, and we still need to be able to deliver on the outcomes. And the challenge for all leaders is to be able to bring lots of different attributes together and see how we can energize and motivate others to work towards a common goal. On to the next slide, please. So we have, as I said, many academics who give us some nice pointers that I think we can have a look at. So that vision Does it have a moral purpose? Now, in the NHS, we feel definitely we've got a moral purpose, don't we? We are caring for people. What could be more important than caring for others? This, at the moment, is a good time for us to check in and care for ourselves as well, and we don't often do that. But also somebody, as a leader, I would say, definitely needs to be able to understand change. Now, how you understand change is something that I'm hoping you take time out, or will take time out in the future, to understand what the dynamics of change are, what it means to people. We talk about adaptive leadership, don't we? About someone who is able to adapt their style to particular situations. But actually, I think being adaptive also means, how do you build your own resilience in the face of great change? I mean, now is a perfect example, but how do you adapt yourself, your resilience, your energy, and your ability to manage through a situation where circumstances are changing so rapidly that you can't actually read the runes, you can't read the signs, you don't really have anything that's fixed that you can then shape what it is that you want to do around that. And that is definitely something that, as a leader, you have to be able to do that and create, as it says on here, coherence. Our people who work with us in our teams look to their leaders to be able to give them assurance that actually you know where we're going, and we need you to take us with you. We don't want to be in a sea of change where we have no guidance points in terms of where we're going or what we're doing. We know from research that actually people feel very demoralised when they don't have control over their environment. And in a sense, part of being a leader is to be able to create a degree of certainty, or a degree of coherence to what the narrative currently is, to enable people to think, right, okay, I know what I'm coming in to do, and this is how I need to do it. And I'm quite grateful actually that Fiona described me as having lots of energy. And I think that is definitely what you need to have as a leader. And it needs to be real, it needs to be authentic. It can't be a moment where you wake up every morning and you're day behind at home and then you go into your situation to perform, because what often happens in those scenarios is that leaders become fragmented and their own well-being really suffers, because they're putting on a performance because they feel they need to do that to get through the day, to get through the challenges, but actually is not linked into their inner resource and connected to their inner narrative too. So it's also about checking into how you re-energize yourself and enable yourself to be an authentic leader. Thank you, Francesca. On to the next one. So I would definitely say that to be an effective leader, we need to be able to reflect, and we're going to talk a little bit about what that means. So, as our lovely quote here from two people who've worked on reflective leadership in the education sector has talked about, yes, life generally is about having to be measured in quantitative outcomes. We know that, as I said, for the NHS, but actually it is our ability to develop and foster relationships and optimize those relationships that enable us to achieve some of the goals that we need to. We often talk, don't we, about how the people are the engine room of any organisation or any business. We can't do anything as leaders without taking our people with us. We can talk about it, but actually we need people to do some of the things that actually generate the safer patient outcomes that we aspire to. So it is all about how we optimise those relationships. Now, I'm going to say something which may seem a bit odd, but I'm going to say it. I'm going to ask you to ask yourself, do you really like people? Because if you don't, then that's something that you can work on and think about and try and understand why. But I would say you really have genuinely got to like people to work in an environment where you are surrounded by people. And our people plan talks about being a compassionate leader. And to be compassionate, you do have to genuinely want to offer support and understanding to another human being, even when that other human being may not be somebody that you particularly feel aligned to or understand. And that, I think, is a challenge to us in the way that we work with others, in the way that we grant others permission to be different from ourselves in order to take them forward. Next slide, please. So being reflective, as these two very erudite researchers are advising us, and with whom I absolutely agree, it's a collaborative exercise. It's not something that we do just by ourselves. We go and shut ourselves in a room quietly at the end of the day or the beginning of the day and think about what we're doing and how we're doing it. It is very much about evaluating insights that we have acquired during a process of activity. Absolutely. But we need to do that in relationship with other people, and we also need to be able to manage that sense of uncertainty. So if you're somebody who likes everything lined up in exactly a well-recognised way, and I'm not criticising it because I am one of those people who likes to have order in my universe, there's nothing wrong with that, but you need also to be able to have the agility to deal with a world of uncertainty, because the world is uncertain and it is changing, and we will all have done the Myers-Briggs kind of personality assessments, which say some people are more suited to change and other people don't like change. Sometimes it's about understanding that in your teams, yes, but it's also about understanding that in yourself and being able to compensate where there may be a bit of a rub. On to the next slide, please. So we have Dewey, who has been described, I have to say, as the father of reflection, saying that it is reflection in action and reflection on action. So in actual fact, there's nothing new there, but the reflection in action is something that I probably want you to focus on and think about as well too, because, as I said, reflection can be done discreetly in a period of time, and I'll give you an example of that in a little bit. But it's also got to be something which becomes almost ingrained in your daily activity, because once you begin to start doing that, your decision making as well begins to change. And the other aspect that we also need to bring into that reflective practice is what it feels like when you're in a particular situation, because it's important not just to intellectualize the process of being reflective, but actually think upon what scenarios, situations, people's decisions, circumstances are all making us feel. And it is definitely about checking in with ourselves. And I'm going to say that isn't a comfortable thing to do at any stage in our lives. It's actually very, very uncomfortable, because we might start discovering things about ourselves that maybe we're not particularly proud of, or we don't particularly like, or we haven't recognised in the past and we're recognising now. And all I'm going to say on that is be compassionate to yourself as well to others, be forgiving, because this is an evolution for ourselves as much as it is for anybody else. We're all on that process of evolving as leaders. Thank you. Next slide, please. Now, I've included this as a kind of a nod to the NHS because we like things like this. We like to see it in pictures. So, but it is a very good reference in terms of helping us to think about what the process could look like. And this is good for when you're sitting in the moment, wanting to yourself think about a particular set of circumstances, or think about your own behaviour in a situation. We probably have all been in those scenarios where we've had a really difficult conversation with somebody which hasn't necessarily gone in the way that we had hoped for. And we're reflecting on it, but maybe reflecting on it as we invariably do in life, which is a bit of a, I guess, a soup of different emotions that go round, mixed in with a few thoughts as well, and they kind of cycle round like a washing cycle, but we don't necessarily come out of it on the other side with any structured thinking. what this in fact does, it enables you to sit down in a bit of a structured way to do that. And I would highly recommend that you write down some of those things that you're thinking, feeling, what your analysis of is of those circumstances or that situation that you found yourself in, and then looking back on it as you've written it. And I am doing that so much more now than I ever did in my earlier days of leading, and wish that I had done it earlier, because the reflective process, we're having that conversation with ourselves, but actually the challenge for us is to be as objective as we possibly can, objectively holding ourselves in a sense, not to account, but looking at circumstances through a lens of objectivity wherever we can. On to the next slide, please. And I've talked about objectivity because, and I love this, human beings always tend to take shelter in experienced and accustomed forms of working and in practiced processes or similar methods. So we do default, don't we? We use shorthand all of the time towards getting to a quick answer or a quick state of play because it's something that we know and recognise. And being self-reflective really does invite us to be uncomfortable and to challenge ourselves as to whether we have taken the shortcut route to a mentally acceptable solution or perception of a state of play, when actually the real learning comes from not just being in somebody else's shoes, but seeing an uncomfortable truth. Next slide, please. So this is you say, why is she showing us a load of books? What does it mean? Well, I'm going to give you a very quick example of how I learned to be reflective, because Fiona's absolutely right. I am full of energy. Somebody asked me to do something. I'm like, yeah, okay, great. I'm going to do it. I'm really up for doing this. And I have spent my entire career to date doing multitasking at a grand scale. I won't just do one thing, I'll do several things, because life is short and it's so exciting and I want to do it all. I don't want to miss out. So I take on all the new opportunities whenever they arise. And I undertook a course a short while ago, which was called Leading Powerful Partnerships, where they had a variety of different people from across the public sector. And we were all thinking about how we could get very disparate groups of people to work together on a common aim. And we had our facilitator, who was a former chief fire officer from London Fire Service, and he was my kind of coach. And I had my one-to-one session with him, as well as a series of other sessions every day. So we'd start the day, as you would expect, with self-reflection. Great first day, Monday morning, look in on yourself and check in and say, why am I here? Why am I doing this course? What do I hope to get out of it? Monday evening, reflect on the day. What did you learn? Fantastic. Tuesday morning, we did self-reflection again. And I was like, but we did self-reflection yesterday at the end of day one. Why do I need to do it this morning? I just want to get on. Come on, guys. There's lots of really interesting stuff on this agenda. Let's skip this bit. And it was painful. 45 minutes of self-reflection every morning and at the end of every day. But I began to get it. And at the end of the course, on my final day with my facilitator, he said, Lena, the thing is, you've got lots of skills, loads of them, because you do all sorts of different things and you've acquired so much over time, as has everybody in this session today. We've all got a myriad of different skills. He said, but you need to think about how you are applying those to every single situation. When you're going into a meeting, which skills are you taking into that meeting? Are you being purposeful and focused in terms of what you're hoping to achieve and what you need to bring in to that meeting? What insights do you need to bring? What particular talents do you need to bring to the fore? What thoughts and experience are you bringing? He said, see that array of skills, knowledge and experience like a bookshop, like a library. All of those skills are like books on a shelf. So when you go into your meeting, pick out the ones that you need and take those in with you. You're not going to carry the whole thing, are you? So take what you need when you're going forward, and you need to be purposeful and focused. And that's something that has been with me since then, and it has revolutionised the way that I work. And next slide, please. So I would say, yes, to be a reflective leader, you need to be a reflective learner. You genuinely need to be willing, able, receptive to seeing things differently, and then harnessing all of those experience, insight, and bringing it forward to allow that to influence how you behave. So people look to you as leaders, and they're watching to see, how are you behaving? What is it you're doing? So that's why reflective practice is very much about real time, constantly, the beginning of the day, the end of the day, but throughout your day in a cyclical process, thinking about how are you creating your personal impact? How are you developing your relationships and moving them into the place where they need to be? And final slide, I think. And this is what I'll leave you with. Food for thought. Which version of reality are we going to show ourselves and others in the future? Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Lena. That was a really fantastic session. Just the key reflections from me on listening to some of that are the importance of being present. You said about this energy, you talked about your energy, and it's not about putting on a performance or a mask, but really it's in being present. And I think this is really a fundamental of how we build compassion, because I think one of the biggest enemies to compassion through research is time. And at the moment, everybody is feeling like they don't have enough time. And I think one of the things that I always hold to is time is our currency, and we can choose how we spend that. And I loved your kind of comment around take what you need from that metaphor of the books. And I think this really kind of, to me, talks around neuroplasticity, and your brain changes depending on what you spend your time doing. So, and your time thinking about. So what are you going to build? How are you going to build your brain? And this metaphor here around, how do you show up for other people is fantastic. So on that note, we're about to go into our group sessions, and I'm going to hand over to Francesca to talk us through what we're going to do next, if that's okay.
Hi, thanks, Sri. You should have all now received breakout session invitations separately to this. If you haven't, don't worry, just stay on this call. So I'm sure you must be used to this from previous sessions, but if you're not, we'll ask you to log off of this call and then join that one separately. It will be for 15 minutes, and each group has got a facilitator. So Lena, Fiona, Helen and Ali are going to be your facilitators today, and they will take you through that discussion. Please ensure that every person has equal time to share their thoughts. We will give you the whole 15 minutes, so I won't talk for too much longer. As I said, if you haven't got any links, then just let me know. I'm just going to go now on to the questions that we're going to ask you to focus on, slightly different questions for each group. And as Fiona mentioned, we don't have a lot of time at the moment, so let's use this time wisely as we are here all together, and just use this to make some really good reflections. So for the first group, whichever number breakout group you are in will correspond to the number question. So for the first group, what does reflective leadership mean? When do you see it in others and in yourself? And then for the second group, how do you do it? What does reflective practice in decision making look like? And can you share some examples from yourself or from others? For the third group, what gets in the way? What are the barriers and challenges for reflective leadership? And for the fourth group, what helps in practicing reflective leadership? What enables you, for example, coaching, mentoring, writing, etc.? These will also be in your breakout group invitations. So if you need to refer back to them, you should have them, and also your facilitators will have them. So that's enough from me. I will let you all go on there. And for, as I say, anyone who's struggling, just stay in this room and I'll look after you.
Thanks so much for that, Francesca. The only other thing I think that I want to share is we're going to have 15 minutes in these conversations, and the facilitator is there to kind of just balance out the conversation, not to really lead it. Helen, thank you so much in advance. She's playing a dual role, both as participant and facilitator. So Helen's group, please thank her for that as well. And not the facilitator, somebody from within the group, could you just share your reflections when we come back together? We're going to do this quite briefly, obviously keeping personal information and stories anonymous, and we're not about trying to recreate that whole conversation and everything that we talked about, but really just a flavour of what resonated for you. So choose somebody at the end of the discussion to who's going to share the thoughts back, and that way we're all going to stay really present in that conversation. So thanks so much, and we'll see you back here in 15 minutes, which is 2:50, and we're going to have just a tiny bit of sharing, and then Ali's going to share some final thoughts. Thank you. So what I'm going to do now is just ask one person from each of the small groups not to share everything that was in the discussion, but to just give us a kind of one breath on what did you take from that group. And I'm going to go to group 1 first, if they're back, because of course they're just being thrown into it, us having overrun slightly. Claire, are you here? Okay, I'm going to go to start with group 2, because that's there we go, we won't go in order now. So who was the nominated sharer for group 2?
That was me, Fiona Giles.
Giles, thank you. Do you want to just share your one breath reflection on the conversation that you just had?
I'll have to take a very deep breath.
Yes, do.
So I think the one breath reflection is around the strength in being able to demonstrate humility and vulnerability within a group setting to create a safe space that is the norm and that challenge is good. And also we then had some conversations about how do we look to externally facilitate some reflective sessions within groups so that that is done on a slightly more structured basis within senior teams especially.
Thank you so much for that. Some really insightful reflections. Group 3, who was your nominated person to share?
That will be me, Fiona.
Mark, thank you.
So we talked about the importance of investing 5 or 10 minutes reflective time, because it plays significant dividends in the long term and the long sort of plan. Fail fast was one of the things that we talked about, the importance of having a go and acting rather than delaying and procrastinating around what could have happened. I think it was embrace adjuncts, particularly alcohol, were our sort of key messages. Thank you, Oliver.
Thank you very much. Those behaviours that stop us feeling. Excellent. Thank you so much. Who's the person in group 4?
Hi, it's me, Sally.
Thanks, Sally.
Hi. So I'm not sure I can give it one breath, but I can talk quickly. So we spoke about what helps practicing reflective leadership and what enables you to do that. So enablers we spoke about was certainly from a clinical background, it would be writing it down, processing it, and then reflecting. And we also thought about time, reflecting good as well as bad. So not, finding fault with yourself all the time. The ability to move away from work, which has become a little bit one-dimensional if you're on Teams all the time. Step away, clear your head. Things just spring into your mind. And it's getting into that practice of, a bit like Lena was saying, morning and afternoon, and maybe it doesn't take that much time. It's just a practice thing you need to get into. And that was it. I hope I've covered most of what we spoke about.
That's really lovely, Sally. I think that word practice, it kind of comes at it from the right mindset, doesn't it? Thank you. And Claire, are you with us?
I am now. Sorry, I had
Sorry,
difficulty
that was my fault. I
connecting.
overran in our group.
Can you hear me?
We've gone to you last. Would you be able to share your reflections on the group in one breath or so?
So I think it's about it, we recognise the importance of gathering the time to reflect, but it's quite challenging to make that space, and asking people to support you in doing that, and recognising that it can be quite an unpleasant place to go, but being kind to ourselves.
Thank you. So this is our bite-sized sessions. This isn't intended to be a 3-hour focusing on reflection, and I really loved what I heard around making time to practice regularly and asking people for your support, for enabling you to do all of that. That it's an investment. I think that was a really lovely word around a short amount of time to do this stuff. So I'm going to hand over to Ali to just have a few closing thoughts on what's next, if that's okay, if you're able to just very briefly share that, Ali.
Brilliant. Thanks, Fiona. And I think, again, this may be demonstrating that protecting some time in our really busy days actually, again, can yield some really positive benefits in both connecting with other people, maybe to share and reflect on their similar experiences, and also equally just to take some time out and have some humour and create a bit of a buffer is really helpful as well. So with that intent in mind, what we're planning is a programme menu of opportunities over this winter for colleagues to do just that, either together and in the form of some different action learning set groups, ways of connecting, bite-sized learning followed by something like this, an opportunity just to share some reflections together. Equally, a series of short guides and tools that can be accessed whenever, outside of work, when you have a little bit more time, both recorded sessions, some masterclasses, and as I say, simple guides to some kind of key leadership elements that can be worked through at any moment. And we're trying to tie this in and get that convergence between the leadership agenda, supporting you in this time in terms of your talent journey, and the really important piece around health and well-being as well. So please contact us. Fee and I will be trying to kind of mark it out in a kind of combined way to bring these two offers together very soon.
Thank you so much for that, Ali, and no one can do it in such a short spread of time as you can. That was absolutely wonderful. Francesca shared in the chat box, if you can see that earlier, a link, and that was just if there is something to very quickly capture the kind of support that you're looking for or what you're interested in. This is a cozy group that we've got here today, and we will be expanding this sort of session out for wider groups as well. So it is important to get your voice heard in terms of what you are hoping for if you haven't done that already. Nothing else from me except thank you so much, Lena, for taking the time to help us take the time. It's been a really lovely chance to see all your faces again, and I hope that I see you again soon. Thank you so much. Have a lovely afternoon.